Today's tutor is Brogan Bertie, who first caught our attention with his innovative interpretation of actor and dancer Leighton Williams, which earned him a place in the next round of Portrait Artist of the Year.
What I really love is that it's so experimental. It's completely unforgiving, there's no blending, everything's going to sit on the surface, so it's really exposed. It's like a painting under a spotlight.
At the semi-final, his bold portrait of actress Jolie Richardson impressed the sitter.
I love how brave it is and strong, and it's such a life force. Brilliant. Thank you.
At the final, his double portrait of acting couple Andy Serkis and Lorraine Ashbourne, and his commission painting of partner Steph, saw him crowned Portrait Artist of the Year 2024.
It's exciting. You know, the paint the coloration's gorgeous, the way in which he puts the composition down. We're always looking for something different. You know, we're always looking for something that feels like it's pushing the boundaries a little bit.
For the winning £10,000 commission for the National Galleries of Scotland, Brogan painted BAFTA award-winning broadcaster Lorraine Kelly, who's blown away by the final portrait.
Shall we have a look? The freedom of the brush marks, to be that free and to be that precise, that balance is magic.
Brogan prefers to avoid using technology when painting and prioritises working from life to capture his sitters.
If you're painting from life, the decisions keep happening as you're painting, so you haven't squared it off. So I think that's something that really excites me.
Making him the ideal tutor for today's masterclass, Composing from Life.
I love painting from life. So what I'm going to take you through today is how to capture a sitter when they're directly in front of you. I think there's a sense of security that people get from painting using a photograph, but there's something really juicy and tangible that happens when you paint someone alive in front of you, and I think it's well worth giving it a shot if you haven't done it before. Today, I've got a model here so we can paint from life. And this is my lovely friend Kemi, who has agreed to sit for me. If you're struggling to find someone to sit for you or you're a bit nervous, just ask friends and family. I've known Kemi for 13 years, which is why they've done this for me. Gently bribe, gently guilt trip people. I just need to practice. So that's what Kemi's doing today. And I think the first thing we do, before I've done any sketching, I think it's really handy to talk to your model a little bit and get them into a pose that they feel comfortable in, that captures something of their personality. I think if you have this encouragement of letting someone move around and find their own position, that kind of works quite well. How are you feeling?
I'm wondering
really good.
if this makes sense. I mean, this feels very comfortable for me. But...
Yeah, I mean, it looks amazing. So I'll start sketching and get some ideas for the composition. What I want from these sketches, it's almost my experimental phase. It's almost a process of finding what I'm interested in, because I don't know yet. So the composition sketches are something that I use to whittle down my options. And what I've done is I've got 2 pieces of A4 paper together, and I've tried to make them into a similar proportion to the final canvas that I want to paint on. And in that way, it just gives me more of an idea of what composition I can fit into the proportion. These sketches really are just meant to be loose and experimental. They don't need to be a finished drawing at all. The first thing I'm interested in is this line of Kemi's leg coming across their body. So I put that in first, and it doesn't need to be anything more than that. And also what I focus on with these sketches is shapes. I'm basically breaking you up into tiny little triangles and rectangles. You're not a person to me yet. You are just shapes.
A concept.
You are a concept. So at this stage with the composition sketches, I'm trying to get them into these big shapes because that helps with how dynamic the portrait is. When I'm talking about big shapes, I'm talking about things like this, like where Kemi's skirt sits there, and then their body comes out the top like this. And this also helps me see that the line of their shoulders isn't equal on both sides. So that descends like that. While it looks like just a shape now, it will give me something quite dynamic to work with their body language. A lot of character is in the slouch of your shoulder, you know? And in the way, like, if we cock our hip or something, there's a lot of character in that. And that's what I'm looking to capture. So by simplifying the shapes and exaggerating them slightly sometimes, I get a real sense of how body language informs character. My first sketches are rough. I really love the shape of Kemi in this. I love their leg going across like this. And I love the idea that I've already got of, like, your head tilt. So I'm going to do another sketch, see if I come up with anything else that I really like. For these sketches, I use charcoal. And I love using a big bit of charcoal because it forces me not to be precious about it. Because the last thing these sketches should be is precious.
Quick question. Should I be looking at you for the final sort of piece, or should I look away? Do you have any preferences for your models?
Do you know what? Yeah, I actually have a huge preference.
Okay.
Of, like, I want you to look at me.
Okay.
I'm, like, obsessed with eye contact in portraits. I think there's something about the connection and about the realness of it. There's no pretense that I am capturing you in a moment of, like, peace, looking away somewhere and doing that. Like, I'm fully like, I've got this person to sit for me, and this is what this painting is. So I like, you know, almost like the viewer can be in conversation with you as much as I have been, you know, that kind of vibe. So you have to look at me really awkwardly for the next 3 hours.
No issues.
Eye contact. This is as simple as the sketches need to be. Like, there's nothing there. I haven't attempted your face. I haven't attempted any detail. What I've got is your body language and the idea of where I want you to sit on the panel that I'm going to move on to. And I'll put these here as my reference images for what I like. Well, I'm ready to start on the real thing. And this is a wooden panel primed with gesso, and I paint on that because I think it's a really gorgeous, really smooth surface, and it just means that all of the paint sits really nicely on top of it, whereas with canvas it sinks in. I'm starting off with some soft mixing white and some burnt sienna, and these are going to be the basis for my sketch layer, and what I need to add to them, because I want them to be really, really transparent, to make my sketch on here quite forgiving, that I can work into it and change things as Kemi moves, as I make different decisions. I'm going to add some liquid, which is this really gloopy stuff. And it's my bread and butter. I absolutely love it. So if I mix these, you can see now that white is quite thick. It doesn't go on easily. That's beautiful for later down the line. But right now, I want that to be really loose, as if I can sketch with it, as if it's, you know, ink to draw with. So I'm going to make that really gorgeous and loose and add a tiny bit of the burnt sienna. And that's what I'm going to sketch with, which you'll be able to see on here if I do my first mark. My first mark usually also is to place the head, which is quite an important part of any portrait, where your head goes. So I'm going to place Kemi's head quite high up because I want to get a lot of their body in. I don't do any gridding up. I guess I'm not so concerned that I will do your proportions really wrong because I think part of the beauty of painting from life is that where I might go wrong is just a translation of what I'm seeing. With the grid, I'd need to use a photograph and everything. So this first step, I still want to feel really sketchy, really loose and really dynamic to try and capture your energy. So the brushes that I'm using as well, they're hog's hair brushes. The main thing that I love about them is that they're rough. Basically, my style isn't very delicate and I don't need to go in for really intricate, delicate detail. And I actually like a brush that confronts my desire to do that if rarely it does arise. So I like these quite thick, rough brushes that let the paint goes on really, really thick. So it's something that I find really, really helpful when doing these stages, and again, just in any stage of the portrait really, but especially helpful with a sketch, is to look at the negative space rather than at the actual subject. So here I'm trying to paint Kemi's arm, which has, you know, the bend of their wrist down into their arm and then across here. And that's actually a little bit complicated because of their long dress. Their wrist looks a little bit unusual. To draw, it doesn't look quite what you expect a hand to be. So I found it helpful here to pay attention to the space around their head there and their arm. And it creates a really strange triangle, but by being able to do the negative space, I almost fact-check my assumption about what their hand, what their arm should look like. And I think that's really helpful to avoid letting your brain fill in the gaps of what our bodies should look like. Especially when painting from life, I think there's a strange assumption that your brain makes, that you want to fill in the proportions. So I think I'm happy there with my really loose, sketchy layer, and I don't want to do too much detail here because the detail is going to come with the painting. So the next phase to kind of support this layer is called blocking in. So I'll fill in the colours all around the sides, and that will help me also carve out the lines of Kemi's body and where the background and the foreground, where everything intersects with each other. I really, really love the yellow of the cushion and the green of the chair behind you. And I think it adds quite a soft, kind of warm, which is something I find your personality is really warm, you know. That adds like a foundation of warmth to a palette that otherwise is like really strong and vivid and like contemporary. So I think I'm gonna start with them and then I'm gonna try and do your knees, your face, your dress and see where we end up with that tension between soft and like vivid and contemporary, you know?
Ooh, yeah, that sounds good.
Also for blocking in, especially at the size that I am working at, I'm going to use a bigger brush because you don't want to spend ages on this either. This is also quite a fast layer.
I'm really intrigued as to how you're going to depict my dress. Because obviously it's giving like Joseph and the Technicolored dress.
What is really useful to me is that it's so sheer. The ruffles and the way it's gathering in certain places is doing a lot of work for me to be able to capture your body language. And I think that's what I'm really focusing on. Even at this phase where the layer is really sketchy, you don't just have to block in. What I'm doing here is you can see I'm like following the lines and the shapes of the body. So these slightly transparent parts are actually giving me a lot of guidance. Like for example, all of the gathers here on the top of the dress, I'm gonna include them in the brush marks. You've got all gathers in your elbow, crease, and on your hip here as well. Also, because this brush is rough and big and the paint is transparent, means the light shines through and I can see all of the brush marks and all of the direction that I need to give me the essence of how your dress is sitting. So now I'm going onto your face, and I think something that helps me ground the portrait is, again, we block in, but we do it almost on a micro scale now. But I'm still kind of trying to abstract Kemi's face. I'm going to start with the line under their neck and this block of shadow here to kind of root immediately my idea of what's the darkest colour, where do I go from there, how does everything sit resting against that. So that was the easiest shape that I could see in Kemi's face. So I'm going to block that in first. So I have a reference for the rest of their face. I think now is a good time to look at how, when we look at someone's skin tone, you know, I could paint Kemi's face all one colour and that would be that. And that's kind of how we understand people as we see them quite quickly. But actually doing a painting like this and using this blocking in method, I want to look a little bit closer and I want to see, say, where there's a purple shadow on Kemi's face just before their hair. I think that looks quite purple. I think that looks quite cool. That's the dark that I want to get, is like that kind of purple, more reddy shade. And then on a different plane of their face, there's quite blue colours, you know? The light looks quite blue to me and quite cool. So those colours together, they're, you know, a purple dark and a blue light and then quite a warm middle of their cheek, those things will create a cohesive face altogether. So what I'm trying to do is blur the colours of Kemi's face into a more abstract form. And I do that by really squinting and trying to tune into the different shapes that are happening. They can be quite disparate colours. They don't all have to be skin colours. And I think that's what creates quite a dynamic skin tone, is when you look deeper for the different colours that exist in everyone's skin. In terms of on the day, when you've got a live sitter in front of you, capturing their exact likeness, which I think is a huge pressure on a lot of people, that they go into a painting thinking I have to get a photorealistic likeness and that's the priority. For me, it's not the priority at all. It's, I think of it like a memory versus a video, whereas a video is very accurate, true to life. A memory, you might have all of these distortions that we find in our paintings as well, ways that people don't look quite right, the ways the likeness isn't quite spot on. But these distortions, that's human, that's more emotional. To me, that's more real and that's more important. And when I think about artists like Lucian Freud doing Kate Moss, or Hockney doing Harry Styles, or any Picasso, the things that are important aren't an exact likeness or a pedantic likeness even. It's an idea to capture essence. And for me, that rings true, that I find something about what we're capturing from life here and in this moment, that's what's going to translate onto my canvas, this essence. You're an idea. You're an essence to me. So far on the face, what I've tried to do is to just separate things into sections, to kind of do quite geometric colour areas, which just helps me get an idea of where everything sits and if it's working in relation to each other. And so from here, what I want to start introducing is the lightest lights and then the darkest darks. And that will give a structure to the face. Because right now, beautiful, but very wishy-washy. We don't know where we're going. We don't know what's going to happen with it. So the darks will help ground and offer a contrast so everything stands out and starts working together. And then the lights, where I've left some space, will just brighten, I guess, what is, you know, quite a flat-toned layout sketch at the moment. And at this point, actually, when I start going in with these darks, slightly finer detail, we are going in tight now that we're on the face. I don't use as much liquid, so I allow myself a little thicker paint as a treat, because we need that now to go on top of these very light layers. A bolder, thicker line will help ground the painting. So to do Kemi's hair, I've noticed where it falls over the body, so it falls down the side here, it still has a coil and a curl to it. And where it falls across their body, it's not falling like a really thin strand of hair. If you see where it falls from their chest to the start of their jaw, that isn't a limp line. That's quite a structured line like that. So to try and get the idea of their hair without going into really fine detail, I'm going to try and capture the weight of it rather than each individual strand. And I can do that by paying attention to how it interacts with the rest of their body, with the rest of the context, how it sits on the chair. So I've gone for the kind of like blondie, lighter colour of their hair. And I do that while noticing that there's obviously shadows and like deeper kind of like ochre-y colours that will add shape to the hair. But because Kemi's locks curl as they go down, I'm trying to use this very conveniently sized brush, which is the exact same width as I want the hair, as a shaper. So if I just follow the curls, that'll give me some sense of the shape. So I think that's where I'll leave it today. I'm happy with where I've got to, where I feel like I've captured the essence of Kemi and haven't gone into huge amounts of detail. I might work on it again later, but I'm happy with where we've got to. And I hope you've been able to see how, by breaking it down into little pieces, painting from life isn't so hard and is so worth it if you just want to get a feeling of what it means to just be one step closer to translating directly from life. So ditch the photograph for now and just try it once and see how you get on.
If you'd like to find out more about these masterclasses, go to our website skyartsartistoftheyear.tv.